What happens when two illustrators send each other a limited palette of colors? You're about to find out. Hi, I'm Aarti, and a year ago, my friend April of Monkey Mintaka had the brilliant idea that we should exchange a limited palette of colors and challenge each other to make art with just those. It has taken us quite a while to come out with this collab video, but today I'm going to show you how I experimented with these, what I made. Here's a little sneak peek. And also, it's not one but two videos, because you'll see what I got and what I made on this video, and you can see what I sent April and what she made on her video on her channel, which I will link down in the description box below. We opened our parcels together on Zoom, and here are a few clips for you to enjoy. Oh, I got little notes inside. That's cute.
Oh, did I put a note in there?
Yeah, you put like two little thingies.
Oh, yes. Post-its. My handwriting's
Two
so...
little post-its, yeah. Sam, I'm busy. You... Oh, the yellow pencil. Oh my gosh. You cut your neon pencil in half?
I did. I'll show you.
Oh my gosh.
I cut it in half because I really wanted to get you one, and then I didn't, and I was like, and I regretted it.
Yeah, you know, afterward I was like, oh, I should have got her that thing. And I was like, drat.
All right, cool.
Okay, cool. Okay, already exciting because, you know, I don't use neon.
I know, that's why I wanted to give it to you.
Ooh, Liquitex marker, cobalt turquoise hue.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And a chunky one. I don't have this one.
Chunky one's the best.
Oh, the brush was the extra, so that's not actually part
that's extra.
Of the extra. And pencils, yay! Ooh, cool. So we have Neocolor 2 Aquarelle in Cobalt Blue, Derwent Inktense Sherbet Lemon. Nice. I don't have that one.
That's a nice color.
Derwent Graphitint Ocean Blue, one of my favorites.
Oh, do you have that one?
I do, but it's like tiny now. And then Luminance Anthraquinone Pink 571. Nice.
I figured it doesn't matter if you had some of them, because it's like how they're used together.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you have the ones I've sent either, so we'll see.
Okay.
All right, your turn. Open up.
I figured the palette, I tried to do like a dark, a medium, a light, you know?
The first thing to do was try and test all these art supplies together, see how they worked, and because we're using a limited palette and only using these colors, it was important to me to know how these colors work together and also the way in which each art supply worked. Some of these are water soluble, some of them are not, so I wanted to see how I could layer them and make different colors from those particular colors that I had been given. As April mentioned, she tried to give me a dark, medium, and a light so that I would have some tonal variation, but the main colors were pink, yellow, and 3 different shades of blue. As you can see, I'm putting one over the other, trying to fiddle about, dropping pencils here and there, but basically trying to figure out how these materials work together and how the colors work together as well. I wasn't as familiar with the yellow neon because I tend to use more pink and orange neon rather than yellow. But that's the challenge here, is to use materials or colors that I'm not familiar with. April has a very cohesive color palette, and I can totally see her doing one of her landscapes or her animals in this color palette, but it's unfamiliar to me. And there is the exciting part of this collab video, to see what I can do with a color palette that's not my usual. Although this is true of any art supplies that you get, whether they're new or not, you really need to experiment with them, figure out how they work. And if you don't experiment with them, if you don't use the expensive colors in your sketchbook, or just to fiddle about with them, when you go to make a final piece, you won't be able to make exactly what you want because you don't understand how these materials work. It's important to use them. It's important to know how they work, what they do, the colors that they produce, water-soluble colors with non-water-soluble colors, how you layer them. What variations of tone can you get? Can you get a variety of lights, mediums, and darks with the art supplies that you're using? Can you get depth in your artwork with those art supplies? How can you utilize those art supplies in order to make your artwork more dynamic, to convey what you want it to convey? I'm thinking about all of these things as I'm experimenting on this page. And 100% the most important thing is to have fun with it. Try things you haven't tried before, or just fiddle about with some tools like a paintbrush that I'm using here, some water. There's never really just one way to use any given art supply. There's always multiple ways that you can experiment with it, and like you can see here, I'm mixing 2 different art supplies that not everyone would necessarily use together in this way. While I was waiting for that little bit of paint to dry so that I could work over it with other colors, I ended up sharpening all of my pencils and starting a little drawing. Of course, I'm doing my little dog people because apparently I can't do anything else these days. But the aim was to experiment and see how much I'd learned by playing with these art supplies so far and seeing the variation that I could get in an actual drawing. Could I get tonal variety, pattern, some amount of depth, and could I create what I wanted to create with just these colors? You might have noticed that I'm not using these colors in my sketchbook. I'm using them on a piece of watercolor paper, which is the normal paper that I use for final artwork. It is slightly more pricey paper than a sketchbook perhaps would be, but it's important to experiment on final paper that you actually use when you create artwork. I will move to my sketchbook at some point, but only after I've understood how these art supplies work on nice paper. That's not to say that you can't start with your sketchbook first. I know people who create artwork only in their sketchbooks, and for them that is final paper. So do your own thing. This is just how I work. It doesn't mean that you have to particularly work in this way. As I'm working on this little dog person, I did make a couple of mistakes. At some point, I dipped the neon pencil in my blue acrylic paint, and you can see that I've turned that mistake into something interesting. It turned into a nice pattern on the top, and perhaps I might use that in my final artwork or in my sketchbook later. Also, the pattern of the Neocolor really appealed to me, and you'll see how using these patterns works out later on in this video. I learned a few different things painting this dog. I learned how to layer the neon over other colors to create pattern and texture. And then it was time to experiment with that little patch of watered down ink that I'd done. Again, layering different colors, fiddling about with it, experimenting, having a little bit of fun, using a water brush in order to create different colors on top of that layer of ink. And then going all out and dipping the water-soluble pencils into actual water. This really softens the lead and gives you a very different texture than you can get by simply using a water brush over the colored pencil. It really dissolves that pigment and it gives you really soft lines, and you can do the same thing with Neocolor ones as well. It kind of blends on the page as you go. The water does dry up pretty quickly, so you have to keep dipping, but it does give you a really nice smooth texture, and if you don't have a water brush, this is a great way to go. That texture I was creating kind of reminded me of leaves, so I decided to add in some branches and see if I could turn it into a tree. And again, this kind of experimentation came in handy later on when I was working in my sketchbook and when I was making a final piece for this collab. Just in case you were wondering, I have speeded up these clips. This is not how fast I normally work, but otherwise, this video would have been 3 hours long if I'd left it in actual speed like I am doing right now. Anyway, the next way in which I experimented with these pencils was putting down a layer of water and then using the water-soluble materials in that. Again, it gives you a very kind of diffused line, and it can be used for various different effects, and it's pretty cool layered one on top of the other as well. I felt that the Neocolor didn't work as well with this as the pencil did, but overall I was pretty happy with my page of experimentation. I've got all the 5 basic colors and the neon, and I think I'm pretty confident I can do something nice with these. They are the Liquitex acrylic marker in Cobalt Turquoise Blue, the Derwent Graphitint in Ocean Blue, Derwent Inktense in Sherbet Lemon, Caran d'Ache Luminance Pencil in Anthraquinone Pink, and the Caran d'Ache Neocolor 2 in Cobalt Blue 5%. Finally, there's April's neon yellow Caran d'Ache pencil that she chopped in half just because she wanted me to have it. I was rather pleased with the fact that I could layer on top of the acrylics, and also I understood how to use these art supplies and I knew pretty much what I wanted to do with them. I really like this color palette as well, even though it's not something I would normally use. There was just one more way that I wanted to use these water-soluble materials, and that was to sharpen them and put them in little palettes and then add a little water to make them into paint. This is pretty much a non-traditional way to use these art supplies, but if I want more diversity in the way that I use these, not just using the pencil or the Neocolor, but being able to use a paintbrush to spread it out in different ways or to create large washes of color, this is a great way to do it. All 3 water-soluble art supplies mixed up well, and they created almost a watercolory kind of pigment that I could use later on. So I've got my markers, my pencils, the Neocolor, and 3 little palettes of paint to start with. But what to draw? April and I chose some images on Pinterest and shared them with each other. These are my images, lots of trees, some people, and some landscapes. We'd agreed that these were the subjects that we would choose. And then here are some of April's choices. Similar but different, and there's a lot of inspiration here. Finally, what we did was consolidate this into one folder of a few images that we would both be working from. So this is our inspiration, and I can see a lot of ways in which I want to use this. So let's get sketching. Before I remembered to film that little Pinterest clip, I'd already done a couple of sketches in my Nina Cosworth sketchbook, and now I'm just going to do a few more layouts based on those pictures that I just showed you and see what I can think of. Obviously, it speeded up because this took me way longer. I had a little bit of a brainwave and remembered this sketch that I'd done in my sketchbook. I think it was during a drawing session or something, but with this girl with all the pictures in the background. And also one of our local restaurants has a lot of pictures and frames on the wall. So that was kind of my inspiration. So based on this and that, this is what I came up with. A dog person with a sheep on a lead and a gallery of pictures behind her. And of course, she's reading a book because of that reference picture that you can see in the background there from Pinterest. Because I love books and I love gallery walls for art and I love dog people. Not so much sheep, but I just thought that would be really funny. When I run with an idea, I generally try and do a couple of different options and work out how I want to do things and how I want to place things. And I also tried a version with a really tiny person and really big gallery wall, but I didn't really feel like that worked for me. I think the first idea was the better one. And then I worked out what colors I wanted different things to be, just so I had an idea in my mind before I actually started on something, just like so I could clarify, really. But afterwards, obviously, as I work in my sketchbook, then that idea will like coagulate a little bit more. That's kind of a weird word to use, but that's how it felt. So here's how my thought process worked. The first couple of ideas were a little bit basic. I never really go with the first idea that I have. It would have been great, so would the second one, and so would some of the others, but didn't really kind of feel right. I really liked this one as well, but in the end, I feel like the quirkier, the better. So I turned the page and started to flesh out that idea that I'd had, working out the shapes and the dog person and the sheep and the lead and everything that I just mentioned while I was doing those sketches. I thought it'd be funny to have the sheep eating the clothes that were on the clothesline in the reference pictures if you go back and look. And I was also experimenting again with the layering and pattern and color and trying two different types of dog people to see which one I would like to go with, and also trying a background color as well in order to see if I wanted to go with a white background or a dark background. Working on those layering pieces earlier also helped me to figure out the patterns that I wanted to work with these, and also in the little frames I'm trying to work out the designs that I would do in the frames in the actual piece, little cameos and references from those Pinterest images. I really like how this skirt has become quite textured. It feels really nice. And I also like the color variation that I can get with just these colors. I feel like I will go with the lighter background, but I did also do some experimentation with trees, which I absolutely love, and little clumping bits and dots and dashes with all of the colors together. And you will see how I use this later on in the video as well. And now on to the final artwork. I obviously drew in pencil, but I didn't video it all because it's really, really hard to see when you're drawing in pencil on screen. But here's the basic gist of the drawing I'd done, and I started off with the neon. The neon does not really go very well over other art supplies, as I discovered when I was experimenting, so I felt like this was better as a standalone thing. And then I added all the other colors in using different tools in order to apply them, thinner, thicker, blending, and so on, as you'll see. I'm using all that experimentation that I did in order to create this final piece, but while I'm making this final piece, I am still creating new methods and techniques using those art supplies. I'm not necessarily just using what I learned while I was experimenting with them. I'm also learning as I go, because every time I try to do something, I realize, oh, that doesn't quite work, or, ooh, this is a new way to use this, let me try that. Or there's color variation that happens while you're actually creating that didn't happen while you were experimenting, and you can just like go with it and go with the flow and use that in your artwork. While I have a general idea of what I'm making, I also don't have a plan. I just know the basic layout that I want to go with, but everything else is just on a whim. If I feel like doing something, I will. I'm also trying to use the same colors in multiple places in the painting to make it a bit more cohesive. And apart from experimenting on those few sketchbook pages about the landscapes and things that might go in these little frames on this picture, I haven't done any real planning. Even when I'm doing the frames, I'm just pretty much winging it, really. But I am having real fun with this. I'm just going with whatever my brain, my weird little brain, tells me to do. I'm experimenting, I'm enjoying it, I'm being an artist. Just listening to my inner self and kind of drawing whatever I want. And I don't know if you notice here, but I put a little H in the t-shirt because it's just a little reference to April's last name. Now that I'm thinking back, I could have just put an A because both of our names start with an A, but well, hindsight. I also started to fill in all the frames at this point. Again, I am not directly using a reference from the Pinterest images, but they're in the back of my mind as I'm drawing this. So I'm just doing some little bits of landscapes and this tree in negative space as well. This part was quite fiddly, and I don't want you to think I did all this in one day. I did not. It was done in multiple sittings, and I'm just going to slow down the video so you can see exactly how slowly I was working. It was really, really tiny details, which takes me quite a long time. Anyway, while I was still working on that piece, I had another idea, and I drew it out and then traced over it on my light box so that I didn't have any pencil lines, and it was based on this tree page that I did in my sketchbook. I really wanted that to be the focus of this piece, so I started off with the lightest color, which is the yellow neon, and then added bunches of tree bits everywhere that I thought I wanted that color, and then went in with all the other colors, fleshing out this tree, making it look really poofy, kind of like an Acer, but not, you know what I mean? And then the idea of this piece was Alice Through the Looking Glass, where this dog person is going through into that landscape in the frame on the wall. I did have a few unexpected changes to the colors that I had intended to use because I had an accident with the marker. As you can see, it dripped all over. I didn't intend the top to be blue, I intended the trousers to be blue, but it worked out in the end. But you can see me fleshing out here the dog person putting their hand on the painting and it kind of turning into almost a portal. And then at the same time, there's a sheep jumping out of the painting. Don't ask me why I think of these things. I just do. That's just how my brain works, apparently. There are many, many weird and wonderful ideas going on in there, which at some point I will draw, I suppose. But anyway, I started to add slightly more deeper colors into the tree just to give it a little bit of depth. Added a little book just for fun, and then put a frame around that painting. I also utilized those paints that I made out of the water-soluble materials more in this piece than I did the other piece because I had more spaces to fill. The last step was adding a few little shadows at the base, and it was done. Here are all the experimental pages and my sketchbook and the final pieces. What do you think? Did I work well with these colors? Did I translate those Pinterest references into something that was cohesive but also unique and interesting? I'm really interested to see what April thinks as well, because these are the colors that she uses on a regular basis and they're not colors I use. But here's what's left after I finished. I broke that Neocolor to use it, and I've also got a fair bit of the color pencils left, so I will continue to use them in my work. When creating artwork, I do always scan it, and I'm going to show you how I put together the pieces because I have an A4 scanner and this artwork was A3. So I scan it and I pop it into Procreate. You can pretty much use any software to use this. People use Photoshop or Affinity Photo. I just happen to use Procreate on this particular day. I create a mask on the top layer, as you can see, and then use an eraser brush. I just choose the one that I like the most with a fuzzy edge. It's not a hard brush. And I choose black in order to erase that section. You can choose a brush size that suits you and just erase along where the scanner has created a little bit of a dark section. And that's how my layers end up. And you can see it's all stitched together neatly. Now, in order to work with things, I always duplicate layers just so that I can go back if something goes wrong, blend them all together, and I have one single file that I can just edit. Duplicating that so that I can always go back to the original if I make a mistake and I want to do that. Renaming that print because I'm going to edit this so that it prints the colors of the original almost, except for the neon, which cannot be replicated. And then I used the saturation and brightness to get it back to match the color of my original drawing. I want to get the colors as rich as possible so that they print as close to that as possible. I'm also using the curves panel to create a little bit more contrast because I've lost that while scanning the image a little bit. It's just a little bit more richness. I don't know if it translates well on screen here, but in person it looks just fine. Because neon colors scan in washed out, I'm going to have to use the closest representation of that and just draw over the neon bits. Where it's mixed with other colors, it's fine, but just on its own, I need to fill in that little section. So here's what that neon looks like once I filled it in Procreate. You can also use any other drawing software for this. It doesn't have to be Procreate. But what I also do is I photograph artwork that has neon or colors that don't scan in well. So I do have the photographed artwork, and I will do the same editing process without filling in the neon. Unfortunately, some colors just don't translate well when they scan or are photographed, and they're always just better in the original. But I do try and do my best, for example, when I make prints or cards or artwork, to translate the colors as closely as possible, and I always do print tests to see how they come out. This is the print test of the one where I replaced the neon with a yellow, and I rather like it, but I am going to do some more experiments with the neon as well. I was quite happy with the way both these artworks turned out, and as a result, I've popped them both in my online shop as prints, and you can purchase them through the links in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and let us know if you use this limited palette of art supplies, and don't forget to go and watch April, because here's what she thought of the art supplies I sent her.
Oh my word, this is like not what I would have chosen myself.
Can't wait to see what she makes. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in my next one. Bye!